Why, hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm Random Randy, and it's good to have you back with me. So, for this little episode here, I wanted to take a look at a couple of things, being Bryce Canyon and just some interesting stuff that comes up when you're looking at North America. Of course, I am not 100% on what's going on with our historical narrative, how much of it is true, how much of it isn't. Just try to keep an open mind for this stuff, in order to hopefully expand my horizons, help other people come to a conclusion, regarding our history. Because as you know, history is written by the victors. Whoever wins the day takes over all the books, right? They rewrite everything, recast themselves in a heroic light, things like that. So, um, and you see this stuff going on with the politics today. You see people being played as a bad guy, as a good guy, but then you see them all shaking hands and patting each other on the back at a soiree. So, really, what can we kind of believe about any of history? Even what can we believe about any of what I'm even showing you, right? But it is fun to explore and look into. Try to keep I try to keep possibilities open in my mind, right? Because I don't know what has happened in this realm in the past. Um, I used to like to think I had some kind of an idea as to what maybe was going on, but the further along in life, the more information comes up, the further away from believing that I know anything that I am. So, again, take this for what it's worth, everybody. This is a touchy subject for some people, get bent out of shape, saying, "Oh, you're absolutely crazy for thinking that there's any kind of regularity to the structure of these canyons and things." Okay. Now, it's, just like some things I've presented, this might be a bit of a stretch for some folks, and that's fine. But it is fun to talk about, it's fun to look into, and that sort of thing. So, we'll take a look first at some ancient temples, just to kind of demonstrate some of the shapes and colors that you're going to see in ancient temples, especially in India and the eastern side of the world. We have things like this, and they all appear to be like hewn from stone, right? So keep in mind that this particular temple in Egypt was supposedly like just buried underneath, you know, rubble and background looking very similar to this back here. So, you got to wonder, like, what are we looking at when we go out and set out into the world and we find upright formations, like stone formations and things, right? Upright formations like these right here. What is going on here? Is it a possibility that these are remnants of a previous civilization? Call them ruins, call them melted buildings if you'd like. Uh, it's definitely becoming more and more clear that something major happened and that we're not getting the whole story when we're told, an asteroid hit the earth, blah, 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 million years ago, this and that. Something happened that it would necessitate the rewriting of history. Um, what that was, what that victory was for those people, I can't say. We can look at fiction, we can look at the truths we're handed. Keep in mind that everything that is presented for a reason. My reason for presenting this stuff is just to open the conversation, to say, hey, why is it such a bad thing to believe that we haven't been told everything and want to explore more about it? So, to look more into this kind of stuff, kind of look around locally, see what makes sense to you, about your local area and things like that. I mean, it gets into some really interesting stuff here in a little bit when I'll show you. And at first I used to think, oh, those AI painting things are garbage. What are people all worked up about? But ultimately, these things are linked into networks and accessing information in a fashion that we cannot as people. All right, but they're coming up with some very interesting kind of compilations as far as when I put in ancient cities in North America. Okay. So these are some of the things that are curious to me. Things like this. You see Bryce Canyon, Utah here. Now there's a lot more of this like upright, interesting type of structure here in Bryce Canyon. Then there is, in the Grand Canyon being just a massive, you know, canyon. So, something to point out though is take a look at this like the sandstone that's being used in a lot of these ancient temples. Very, very similar, kind of coloration. And you can imagine if these statues were eroded down or destroyed partially and they were just standing there. And people are like, well, that's a lot of statues. That's like an awful extreme, amount. But like if this civilization was there for a long, long time and they really liked their own image, much like we do today, why would they not put little statues everywhere? Especially if they were, communicating or interacting with a plethora of different gods, right? So, it's interesting in itself. A lot of the formations in these areas are just strange, right? We have supposed natural arches, right? And it's like, what's going on here? How does this work out? And we'll just say, oh, a river flowed through it, which is fine. Maybe it did. All right. I don't have a time machine, unfortunately. I don't know if I'd want to go back and find out the stone truth, right? About everything. It would be a lot less fun to explore this stuff and wonder. So the Grand Canyon is another one. So I'm pretty much putting all canyons kind of on the table here. Okay, this is a modern underpass. Cut through one of these supposedly. We don't know really any of this. We have a basic history from like the year 1800. Weather reports, things like this were not pinned down before 1800, and that's kind of interesting in itself. It makes you wonder. It doesn't, necessarily speak of conspiracy right out of the gate, but like, look at this. This is in Bryce Canyon, Utah, and like, there's so many of these. It makes you wonder what, if any, right? If any, bear with me now. If any of this was infrastructure for different things. Now we're shown, kind of the Pueblo stuff here, you know, um, but if you look up, like, it's weird, guys. If you look at the stone, the supposed stone above it, it's very granular, and the grains are about the same as the bricks are down here. So did they just pick up some of these, stone bricks and kind of craft this into this mountainside? It's a possibility. And what's strange is when you look back into this mountainside, you see this is like capped off or sealed up with some kind of a black substance here. So did this go like back into the cliff super far? We really don't know. Now, John Levi has some videos out, Chaco Canyon, things like this. So, go take a look into these places if you've never looked into it. I haven't been there personally, but I grew up in the western area of the United States. So I have seen a lot of this landscape, and it always seemed really alien and strange and out of place to me. Especially, deserts just don't seem natural, guys. I know they give us the excuse that the mountains are there, so all the water dumps on the mountains. But ultimately today, with weather being controlled the way it is, there's no reason for a desert. There really isn't. People say, oh, well, the water's limited. Yes and no. All right. Things are being manipulated to serve a certain purpose, just like they always have. Okay. And if you've looked at any of my other episodes, one of those big reasons is going to be mining. Okay. And there's a reason that they tell us, hey, aliens created you and you're just a slave mining race. I don't completely buy that, but there is definitely some piece of truth to that. Um, and if we are a race of slave miners, right? And you see the beautiful cities that we build today. Why would we not have done that in the past? Are we really that dumb? Are we coming out of that much of a stupor, or are we sliding back into one? That's the thing that's curious here is what was humanity like, back in the day and so on. So some of these places, these arches, the stone, sandstone, right? And something interesting about sandstone is it's very similar to concrete. Okay. Maybe a different type of concrete made with sand, hardened into stone. It's not the same as granite. But geopolymers are an interesting thing, and we'll dig into that at some point. Probably not today. But so Bryce Canyon, right? And then we have this one's in Colorado here. So I mean, we're talking all throughout the Western United States, Southwest, and so on. And now we're not even like going to get into, the other parts of America that are interesting. Like some people have begun commenting in some of the comments about different places that they have seen that are out of place. And I really hope to kind of stir up that conversation and say, hey, what's going on in your neck of the woods? Do you see anything that's out of place? Like anything strange? And again, something to keep in mind is this temple complex, before it was excavated, was just a hillside. Okay. It was just a hillside out in the desert, much like what we see in the Southwest United States. So, what is under all of that stuff? What is under all that stuff? And also, how much of these type of things, like these national park structures and things like this, how much of this stuff was just set up to give people a place to go and check something out? Meanwhile, this entire structure here may very well be a structure, not necessarily, a natural thing. Now, does that mean that I believe everything's a melted building? No, it's not, but maybe it is. Ultimately, I got to keep my mind open to the possibilities because we really don't know. We know what we're handed, and that's fine to a certain point, but you know, I- it just seems so coincidental and feels so strange that, you see places like this. Like, look at this, guys. Look at these ruins on this top of this hill or this mountain. What's underneath all this dirt? Was there more to this thing? You know what I mean? Was this entire area a giant complex, like a massive city? And if it were a city, what would those places look like, right? Back when they were functional, operational, right? Back before whatever happened did, this to the landscape. And, you can believe if you'd like that this was all done by a river flowing, right? An ice age. And, a lot of it probably was. I'm sure that there's an ice factor, a water factor involved here. But for one, I don't believe that the human story is as short as we're being told. A lot of, kind of Christians would be like, no, very devout, 6,000 years only been on this planet kind of Christians will be like, no, that's not true. And then, you'll have your space lovers telling us that we're just random specks in an infinite, meaningless universe. I don't think that's true either. Um, but everybody has a personal truth and they're entitled to it, and I think it's a beautiful thing. So looking at these canyons just seems strange to me. Okay. This actually is in Syria, so let's not use this for an example, but you see the color of the stone and the dirt and everything else. So I went over and I was like, hey, AI, um can you show me what ancient cities in North America look like? And here's what I got. And I did it a few times. I only used a couple different AIs, but this is what I'm talking about. Like, and whether it was reading my mind or what, this is what comes up. And you see that the entire complex is kind of built into this mountain here, right? Also keep in mind, like, look at this shape. It's very regular, kind of cymatic, Starfort-esque, slightly, right? Just a little bit. So that's one. And again, AI has access to a lot of information, and it pulls from all that information to create these things. Um, and here's another one. Here's another one for it. Let's look here. All right. So if the cities were built into the countryside, how would we know if they were destroyed, if they were laid waste to, cataclysm happened, ice age happened, whatever happened, and come out the other end of that cataclysm, and you have piles of rubble. And there are some reports of ancient temples and things in, like, there's one report from like 1909 in the Grand Canyon, and we're going to take a quick look into that here. And so here's another AI rendition here. Okay. And I think that this is pretty close, guys. It's got the canals, it has the the masonry that we're used to seeing in ancient ruins. Just imagine this covered in a layer of desert, right? And we would find some foundations and things like that. But are we really finding the foundations, or are we finding the tops of these things? And is there that much sediment built up? And where did it come from? Right? Where did it come from? Where did all that sediment come from? Okay. So we're going to take a look, fair use notice, educational, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Uh, when the Smithsonian discovered an ancient Egyptian colony in the Grand Canyon. And this is a pretty hot topic in history. Like, they keep pushing our history back further and further. When I was young, it was 6,000 years. Now it's 12 to 15,000 years. So, this is an ever-changing thing. The science is not ever exact, but people like to operate under the assumption that it's the end all be all, right? So, and most folks would disregard this kind of stuff. Now, did the Egyptians cross the Pacific Ocean and wander to the Southwest thousands of years ago? Personally, I think that we had a couple of things going on. We had an Eastern Roman Empire and a Western Roman Empire. Everything was built under the Roman Empire, much as it is today. A lot of people like to say, oh, no, it's not, it's Britain, but you start looking into things, treatises and different stuff, and Rome never went away. It rebranded, reclaimed, reused, started over, probably over and over again throughout time. This may be like, the empire that's spoken of in like many, many fictions and fantasies. Okay. This thing has been churning away in the background, kind of pushing us to create on account that it cannot, or something to that effect. There's a lot of crazy rabbit holes to go down on that thought, but we're going to jump over and take a look at parallel North American civilization. So the story on the front page of the April 5th, 1909 edition of the Arizona Gazette recounted the discovery of a series of bizarre caves and artifacts in the Marble Canyon region of the Grand Canyon. The report claimed two Smithsonian-funded archaeologists, a Professor S.A. Jordan and G.E. Kincaid. G.E. Kincaid is probably the more famous of the two, the one you hear about more, and that they are responsible for this find. Now, the article notes discoveries which almost conclusively prove that a race which inhabited this mysterious cavern, hewn into solid rock by human hands, was of Oriental origin, possibly from Egypt, tracing back to Ramses. If their theories are born out of the translation of the tablets engraved with hieroglyphs, the mystery of the prehistoric peoples of North America, their ancient arts, who they were and whence they came, will be solved. Egypt and the Nile, and Arizona and the Colorado will be linked by a historical chain running back to ages which staggers the wildest fantasy of the fictionist. So if you have all of your fiction built and this upsets that status quo, you're not going to come out. You're not going to let this stuff get out and ruin everything you've just finished writing and establishing over the last couple to few hundred to 1,000 years. You're just not going to do that. Okay. And they attribute most of, the record keeping to scribes that were, embedded within the church, within like the Holy Roman Empire, within the papacy, and all this stuff. So if they are controlling the information, uh, you know, then they're controlling the information. And come on, guys. Now, this is a dangerous reason to explore, which, they put it off limits now. You go to the Grand Canyon, you can't go and look for these caves. They have, drones. I mean, it's secure, much like the Antarctic Circle, or much like down there. So it's a really strange thing going on. Supposedly the Smithsonian was called out to this find, right? And they found like a large tomb with mummified humans, and it's like a veritable mashup of Egyptian and East Asian cultures. So The site is about 42 miles away from El Tovar Crystal Canyon, and the Arizona Gazette noted that the cavern's entrance was 1,500 feet down a sheer cliff. So you can imagine, if these places were built in to the landscape, I mean, that would be the most efficient for cooling, things like that. You know what I mean? If you're out in the desert, you're gonna want to live kind of underground, right? Like it's the temperature's always good. You can, kind of let in enough sunlight to grow your stuff, but only that much. So I mean, there's a whole different way of living that might be entailed in these, civilizations if they existed, right? Like, again, I don't have a time machine, but it is fun to speculate and look at this stuff and go, what was going on here? So there's no record, of course, through the Smithsonian that Kincaid or Professor Jordan with the Smithsonian's Department of Anthropology, nor is there a paper trail at the Smithsonian detailing the artifacts gathered on the expedition. So, Smithsonian representative once said when asked about Kincaid's claims, well, the first thing I can tell you before we go any further is that no Egyptian artifacts of any kind have ever been found in North or South America. Therefore, I can tell you that the Smithsonian Institute has never been involved in any such excavations. Deny, deny, deny. Now, according to theorists, conspiracy or otherwise, the Smithsonian Institute went so far as to destroy the artifacts to maintain its historical viewpoint. Now, something that maybe I'll have to present for you folks later on is there's a book called The Smithsonian Contributions to Knowledge. It's a pretty interesting read, goes through antiquities in America, um, really kind of like downplays the complex nature of some of these ruins and things, making them seem more primal, primitive, and things like that. But in the very beginning of the book, it outlines the goal of the Smithsonian. Okay, the goal of the Smithsonian is to create and disseminate information. Okay, that's it. Uh, and it doesn't really go on to say create the information. Uh, it's acquire. Okay, to acquire the information. They don't tell you how they're going to acquire the information. Um, but for most people, if you're out digging in your backyard and you find something, holy cow, you're going to call the university, right? Who's in bed with the university? Smithsonian, right? So, keep that in mind. This stuff is tied together. There's such a thing as compartmentalization within our culture, within corporate America, uh, within corporations, military, so on. So, guy A is not going to know what guy B is doing. Guy B is not going to know what guy C is doing. He's going to know this very, very small, very detailed piece of information in order to achieve his creative kind of direction. Okay. And that's what all this is. Compartmentalization is creative direction. You put somebody in a box and you're like, listen, here's this thing to think about. I'm going to pay you to focus on this. Okay. Much like many of us get paid to focus on someone else's dream at work every day. We're going to pay you to focus on this factor, but don't go outside of this factor or you'll be fired. You'll be let go. You will get a pay doc. You will be reprimanded, so on, depending on the case. So compartmentalization is key to why if this is a secret, how come people haven't come forward with it? I think that they have. I think that they've tried to, and they've been just completely shot down and relegated to the back pages of the internet, much like this. So Kincaid and Jordan returned without artifacts or pictures of the finding. Um, so we only have the story. We only have the story. And it's weird. Maybe Kincaid is a false name. Maybe the guy existed. Maybe he didn't exist. Maybe this is just flights of fancy for his newspaper. Um, there's also a kind of interesting note here on Los Angeles. So, we can kind of look at the whole Southwest and wonder what's going on there. I know I definitely do and have always driving through the desert and things like this. Now, in 1934, there was a map of a secret underground lizard. They call it Lizard City. Um, is this like, is this just a jab at the elite, being lizards apparently or something? What's going on here? But this is let's see if they have the newspaper. They don't have the article, of course, um, which is unfortunate. But anyway, 1934, Warren Schufelt told the Los Angeles Times that he discovered the remnants of an ancient reptilian civilization under Los Angeles. Um, Even though Schufelt's story was in the LA Times, even though the story was a load of bullpucky, they he left his little map, okay, and that map looks something to this effect. Of course, it doesn't want to pull up. Anyway, um, yeah, we might have to. But anyway, it's detailings of the tunnels underneath Los Angeles. Now, if you've ever lived in Los Angeles, you understand that there are tunnels under there. There is a subway underneath Los Angeles. There's things going on underground there. Um, and they definitely have stable enough bedrock at least to put skyscrapers up and things like that. So why would there not be tunnels going through there? There's obviously plumbing. So, these things aren't a far cry from what we can do as humans right now. Anyway, Lost Reptilian City. That's an interesting read. Um, I'm not going to dig and find the what do you call it right now? The article and the map and everything. That's kind of off point. But anyway, so if these people in the early 1900s, keep in mind, like, they didn't have such a lock on everything, on information like they do today, right? So it's just something I wanted to point out. There was some comments about Bryce Canyon and stuff in the comments, on one of the other videos, on the Grand Canyon video. So I thought I'd take a look and just kind of see how strange this area is here. Um, the entire Southwest. All right. And I just try to keep an open mind. I'm wondering if hopefully sometime in my lifetime we will get some of the insight as to what all's been buried by the Smithsonian. Um, we know for sure giants has been like swept under the rug big time. Were these giants the civilization, that existed in North America? We really don't know, but it is a ton of fun to think about, a ton of fun to look into. And so, I just wanted to give that shout out to folks and just kind of say, hey, there's maybe something strange going on in Bryce Canyon also. I do believe that mining fits into this significantly, that our perception of time is so far askew that we just are not able to see this stuff, and that maybe is by design. And brings into question what exactly is a cataclysm? What is an apocalypse? What is, we have apocalypse as, an unveiling. Okay. Maybe we're in one of those now, but like a cataclysm can be so many different things. Now, for those of you on the fringe, you might know of something called HARP. It's high energy active auroral research project, and it's in Alaska, and there are several facilities like this throughout the world. And these things can manipulate energy as such that possibly they can create seismic activity, things like this. And if you go and look back at the one I did, the Quarry Earth, on mining, you will see that some of that seismic activity is necessary for the extraction of a lot of these materials. So if we are here to mine, like the Anunnaki story says, um, then this stuff would be going on in the background without us knowing it. And what's another thing that happens in the background? It's in computer terminology known as a daemon, right? So, quiet your demons, quiet all that stuff going on in the background. Hopefully, you can think for yourself, decide whether or not you want to even consider this information. I do think that regardless of whether there was, an ancient civilization or a more recent civilization here in North America, I think that it deserves a second look. I think that everything we've been taught and is plastered all over National Geographic and all over your TV is and has served its purpose. It's got us to where we are today, but is it time to take a second look? Is it time to kind of come up to our own conclusions and create our own story? Um, Now, the interesting thing about that is my story is going to be different than yours, and yours is going to be different than your neighbors or your loved ones. But that's okay. Like, why we're, taught that that's not cool. Everybody has to conform to the same line of thinking. That really stifles your creativity when you limit yourself like that. And keep the possibilities open, keep an open mind, and I want to thank you for tuning in. And go check out the podcast. Tons of stuff over there. Talked to tons of different podcasters and had a couple of authors and just different things going on over there. So that's always cool, especially if you're just driving back and forth and don't have the moment to watch a video on YouTube. Maybe you can listen to my wild rants there. So go check that out, Red Thread Podcast, and just live in love, folks. Love each other. Hopefully you can love yourself enough to love each other. And that's gonna about wrap it up for today. Much love and have a blessed day.